I am Sophronia Scott. I'm the director of the Alma College MFA in creative writing, and welcome to Poets and the MFA. This is a wonderful opportunity for you to hear the excellent poetry faculty that we have in the program, but also this is a celebration of National Poetry Month. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. I'll tell you a little bit about our program. Then I will introduce our poets and let them take it from here. You will have the opportunity toward the end to ask questions about what it's like to study poetry at the graduate level, or anything you heard about what you've heard read tonight, and we will go from there. So to begin with, well, I first want to say that National Poetry Month, which we're so happy to be celebrating, I did some research and I found out that this is actually the 25th anniversary of National Poetry Month. And it was launched by the Academy of American Poets in April of 1996. And National Poetry Month reminds the public that poets have an integral role to play in our culture and that poetry matters. And I agree with that big time. Over the years, it has become the largest literary celebration in the world with tens of millions of readers, students, K through 12 teachers, librarians, booksellers, literary event curators, publishers, families, and of course, poets, marking poetry's important place in our lives. So for our celebration tonight, we are also bringing it to you via our MFA program. So I'm going to share my screen briefly to tell you a little bit about the program if you don't already know about it. So this is actually a new program for Alma College. Alma College has a history of being a strong liberal arts school. And when they decided to begin offering graduate level programming, it just made sense to begin with a Master of Fine Arts because the arts are already so much a part of its history, of Alma's history. So this program, the Alma MFA, is actually a low residency program, which means you don't have to move, you don't have to quit your job to be a part of this program. It is a 2-year degree that requires you to be in person at a residency only twice a year for a 10-day residency. So 2 10-day residencies. One will be, our first one, in fact, will be June 17th through the 27th, and it will be on the campus of Alma College. Our winter residencies will be about an hour north at the Ralph A. McMullen Conference Center in the beautiful woods of northern Michigan. During these residencies, it's basically an intensive. You will be spending time in workshop, having your work read, critiquing the work of others. You will be attending lectures, readings, both from faculty, from students, and also from visiting writers. And you'll be learning more about the publishing world in general. You will then be paired one-on-one with a faculty mentor, and you will develop a study plan for the coming term, and you will work one-on-one with that faculty mentor. You will have a reading list and a series of deadlines. And each month for the next 5 months, you would be responsible for submitting a packet of work to your mentor, which would include about 25 to 30 pages of creative work and critical work based on your reading and study of craft techniques. Once those 5 months are done, it's time for residency and you will come back again. So it's a 2-year program and you may study fiction, nonfiction, or poetry, which is what we're discussing tonight. We also offer a dual genre option where you may study poetry as well as one of the other genres, fiction or nonfiction. Upon graduation, you will be able to demonstrate a proficiency of writing skills. And I like to say that you will have mastered your craft in a certain way. You will be able to wield your talent with a certain amount of intention. You will understand craft and the use of it. You will be able to think and read critically as a writer, and you will have a knowledge of the publishing industry and an understanding of where your work fits and where do you want to publish and where else you may pursue your writing interests post-graduation. The visiting writers and publishing experts that will be featured throughout residency will include many bright names, but I'm happy to announce to you, since this is our poetry night, that we will have the U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo at our first residency. She is kicking off our residency, so she will deliver a craft lecture specifically for our students, and then in the evening deliver a public reading. And I will tell you, she will probably play her saxophone, I'm willing to bet. She's an awesome saxophone player. So that's what's going on with the MFA. And I will introduce to you, once I stop sharing this screen, our poets for this evening. So I will give you all of their bios and then let them read in order. The first will be Jim Daniels, who is actually an alum of Alma College. As a writer, Jim Daniels has authored 28 collections of poetry, 6 collections of fiction, and 4 produced screenplays. He has also edited or co-edited 6 anthologies of writing. He is a recipient of 2 fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts and 2 from the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts. His books have won 3 Michigan Notable Book Awards, the Brittingham Prize for Poetry, the Blue Lynx Prize for Poetry, the Tilly Olson Creative Writing Award, the Milton Kessler Award, and 3 gold medals in the Independent Publisher Book Awards, among others. And his films have won many awards in film festivals around the world. His work has been published in the Best American Poetry and Pushcart Prize volumes. He has read his poetry on Garrison Keillor's Prairie Home Companion, and his poems have been frequently featured on Garrison Keillor's The Writer's Almanac. And I get that every day, so that's really exciting to me. Poet laureates Bill Lee Collins, Ted Kooser, and Tracy K. Smith have all showcased Jim's writing as part of their work to bring poetry to average Americans, such as in Collins's Poetry 180 anthologies, Kooser's American Life and Poetry series, and on Smith's poetry podcast, The Slowdown. During his long career, Jim has warmed up for singer-songwriter Lucinda Williams at the Three Rivers Arts Festival, had his poem Factory Love displayed on a race car, and is sending poetry to the moon in 2021 as part of the Moon Arts Project. A native of Detroit, Jim currently lives in Pittsburgh, where he is the Thomas Stockham Baker University Professor of English. At Carnegie Mellon, he has received the Ryan Award for Excellence in Teaching, the Elliott Dunlap Smith Award for Teaching and Educational Service, the Mark Gelfand Service Award for Educational Outreach, and the Faculty Service Award from the Alumni Association. Our second reader will be Leslie Contreras Schwartz, and she is the 4th Houston Poet Laureate. She is the author of 3 collections of poetry, Black Dove Paloma Negra, Fuego, and Night Bloom Encinote, which is a semi-finalist for the 2017 Tupelo Press Dorset Prize, judged by Ilya Kaminsky. Leslie's work, including essays and short stories, has appeared in Pleiades, the Missouri Review, Pank, Iowa Review, Verse Daily, Catapult, and Zycants, 21 Mexican-American writers of the 21st century, edited by Irene Lara Silva, among others. She has collaborated or been commissioned for poetry projects with the City of Houston, the Houston Grand Opera, and the Moody Center of the Arts at Rice University. Leslie was born in Houston, Texas, with Mexican-American and Mexican roots going back several generations in Houston and Texas. She's a graduate of the program for writers at Warren Wilson College, and she earned a bachelor's at Rice University. She's also a member of the Macondo Writers Collective. She has taught at University of Houston and Rice University, and she teaches community workshops and is a speaker on the topics of mental health and poetry. Our last poet for this evening is Benjamin Garcia, and Benjamin's first collection, Thrown in the Throat, was selected by Kazim Ali for the 2019 National Poetry Series. Ben works as a sexual health and harm reduction educator in the Finger Lakes region of New York. A son of Mexican immigrants, he received his BA from the University of New Mexico and his MFA from Cornell University. He had the honor of being a 2019 Lambda Literary Fellow, the 2018 Canto Mundo Fellow at the Palm Beach Poetry Festival, and the 2017 Latinx Scholar at the Frost Place Conference on Poetry. He is the winner of the 2018 Puerto del Sol Poetry Contest and the 2019 Julia Peterkin Flash Fiction Contest. His poems and essays have recently appeared or are forthcoming in Agni, American Poetry Review, Boston Review, Missouri Review, Kenyon Review, New England Review, Best New Poets, Crazy Horse, Lit Hub, and Breakbeat Poets Volume 4, Latinx. Thank you all for being here this evening. And Jim, I will let you take it away.
Thank you. Pleased to be here with you all this evening. And I decided to just, I have a file of recently accepted poems that I keep on my desktop. And so I just went in and just decided to read my most recent poems that are going to be published, just because we're all working writers, and I think that's an important part of this program, is that we work to get our poems out there and find an audience for them, and we could certainly help you do that too. So I'm going to start with a poem called Barnwood, and it's set in Michigan, involving family history, which the epigraph is a quote from a newspaper story. Bert Conroy, a Fremont farmer, died late Saturday of burns received as a result of a gasoline explosion while operating his tractor. My great uncle Bert died when his tractor tipped over and caught fire on his farm near Lexington. Aunt Roberta moved back to Detroit with her daughter Maxine and married an alcoholic plumber whose son Chuck the policeman kept him out of jail. She had few options, and when sober, a plumber could provide. The farm stayed in the family another 50 years. Once I drove by it with an old friend who wanted the barnwood when it collapsed, and it did. My father brought home field stones piled at the edge of a plowed field to line the bushes in front of his house in Detroit. He sold the farm when everyone else died. Somebody took the barnwood for decorative purposes, I imagine. I imagine Uncle Bert dying in flames and fury. He grew sugar beets for Pioneer Sugar. The new owner grew soybeans and sold the fracking rights. My friend died before he could get a share of that wood. Aunt Roberta knew all the family stories, but never told Bert's out of respect for the plumber or shame for not saving the farmer, or out of simple love, weathered gray for decades, but still standing. And the next poem is called The Great Flood. It's a very loose sonnet. Rain enters the equation, and suddenly we're on our hands and knees, mopping up all our chances at happiness, hoping to wring out a few into the bucket. God dreamed up graceful exits as a biblical tease, leaving us to hobble out in our dirty drawers, our map in shreds, the implied, and don't come back in the slammed door. The sigh of relief behind us, audible as rain. At least we started with sunshine and a clear path. At least we once looked up and imagined heaven, imagining it a heaven in itself. At least we once heard rain, imagined applause. And this next poem is set right here in Pittsburgh, where I live now. I live close to both Carnegie Mellon and the University of Pittsburgh, so sometimes we get surrounded by students. And this is called August Pause, watching somebody drop off their lover for college, basically. August paused to watch a young couple kiss in the street, once, twice, pushing hard into each other against a blue Kia with Ohio plates. Then he slams the door. She stands on a curb wobbling. He drives away slow. She's moving into next door Pittsburgh. I sit on my porch watching dead ants fall from my roof where the exterminator sprayed. At the university where I teach, she'll get oriented this week. That's the plan. What's their plan? Goodbye kisses like that. Young sugar kills an old man like me, doubting their love can survive the distance. Poison you can't see or plan for. Raining ants out here. And my mother died just right before the pandemic started, last leap day, February 29th. And so this is kind of going back there. It's called Death Watch. Rain thuds hollow against window glass, fills gutters, puddles above sewer drains. Rain into sleet, into mad bouncing dice, unlucky under streetlights. Shame is a hard shovel against concrete, edges curled from days humping coal into the furnace before the transition to gas. My mother transitions into spirit in the next room. Water dripped into her mouth with a syringe, sentences drizzling slowly out, unfinished into silence. About that shame, to shovel through ice, toss it aside, to bury her now. Who is ashamed of what? Why do we quit calling survival luck and start polishing our watch faces? I am ashamed for wishing her dead. All that rain out there, evaporation invisible as faith in here. And the last poem I'd like to read is actually, they did a volume of poems to honor Ted Kruser, the former poet laureate, and I contributed this poem, which came from a meeting with Ted after when he was doing a reading. He's a very generous poet in all things, but one of the things he said at this, that these dinners with writers are not always the most comfortable things, but my ears perked up. The poem's called "The Crucial Lack of Redemption," and Ted said, when people were offering him some wine at the table, he said, "I quit drinking when it turned into a part-time job." I studied Spanish for years and years, but never learned to roll my R's. Like an engine not turning over, slowly wearing the battery down. This, after it took me 8 years of remedial speech to correct the slurring of my words. This, before I began to drink myself into slurring again. Though even drunk, I could not roll, could not flutter those beautiful syllables. My father never learned to say I love you or use a computer or GPS. I spent and wasted great quantities of unspared change considering what is willful and what cannot be helped and what cannot be blamed. Lift the hood and peer under as if something could be done. Sometimes you just have to slam that hood back down and walk away. I'm a pretty good walker, I've learned, wearing out multiple pairs of shoes and blues on city sidewalks, rubbing shoulders against brick for luck. If I tell you I stopped drinking, that might suggest a certain redemption, but there's always the matter of the R's circling like flocks of blackbirds in December that I can never name. So that's it for me. Look forward to hearing from my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for those beautiful poems. I'm so grateful to be here with wonderful faculty and our director, who I know is starting an exciting program, and I'm looking forward to it. I will be reading from 2 books today. My second book, Night Bloom and Cenote. I'll start with poems from there. Inheritance. My body holds pockets full of other bodies, secreted cells of my grandparents, inside my parents, nested in an infinity of theirs. I am made of those sweat-filled sheets of sorrow, a clothesline of flinching blouses, waiting for that slap and backbeat to dry. My mother hiding under the house of my body, the leather belt from which she is hiding. My organs of wrist that ring into prayer of tied up and drowning, but also the pulp of tomato sap running down my mother's neck on the ride back from a farm, face up to sun, pressed up against cousins in the back of a pickup. And across town, my father's boy body running with all the joy he can muster to every single dirt base. And he can turn as brown as his body will let him, all the sun's blessing. My birthright, my body's water-filled mouth, my great uncle choking on grass and oil drip in Buffalo Bayou as it swallowed up his childhood. That endless body of water, always a fit full of pump and pin, the giving of life, the taking away of it. And the Maya woman, my greater grandmother, she is folded here near the heart, that beast of a muscle made of slurs and songs, Contreras, Merino, Hernandez, Aguirre, cheek to jowl with the enslaved ancestors, dropped in a world of wild, squeezed into a fist. The Spanish of my body butchers the trees until the landscape is bald. And yet my body remembers both the black madder trees, those rows of empty and erase, the bruise-shaped branches that drip and drip and drip and drip, but also the sound of that click in a home run, the sound of running feet, and the fullness of my mom's hunger satisfied. All this, a long story that spells my name, marked with a language to survive. And this is also from the same book, Weep holes in body. I didn't actually understand what weep holes were until Harvey hit Houston. I didn't understand that they could actually, there was weep holes served an important purpose to drain out water from your house. And this was a major problem in Houston because people got 6 feet of water in their house, so weep holes were useless. So this is called Weep Holes in Body. My body remembers itself distantly, humming while I pick out soap, detergent, floor cleaner, and scouring sponges. I do not want to hear stories about my body while I'm shopping to strip my house of dirt, praying for that future of mint clean and green to seep into me. Then its blow, made of black and silvery fists, pain appears in aisle 5, a story that my body tells me in the highest pitched sound, a crushing warble and hiss, hunching me over the shopping cart, saying, listen to me. No, do not even try to squeeze out the sound and crush of lungs and muscles and throat, its crumbling paper wad. You don't want to write this opera, conduct my scratchy song, deal with it. I stand mute. I stand mute. I stand mute. Every aisle fills with water. I float to pain, rise to its surface, a blubbery body. I'm made into its throne, its trap door. Terrifying, this surrender to a creature born out of me. And all I wanted was a simple child with a face, hands, and 4 limbs. Instead, monstrous and beautiful, hitched to my hip and grand deformity, I am its compulsory guardian, and servant. I'm afraid of its living with the same intensity as I am afraid of losing my own biological children. I know it knows what I'm capable of doing in my mind. I'm afraid this pain is tethered to that seesaw of chutes and black holes hiding in my neurons, its circuitous maze that leads back to something I always want but can't find. I clutch to the shopping cart bar, its metal grip, holy mother of medral packs, steroids, albuterol, morphine, codeine, anti-inflammatory, antibiotics, methotrexate infusions, and all its vials and IV altars. I want to cut out this sickness out of my body and bury its bones, its scattering of calacas rooted in the city of my chest. Give me the knife. I will be the surgeon. I want to look at this beast. I want to see what it feels like in my quivering palm. Breathe out in a whistle. What small thing commands so much from me and pretends arrogantly that I am not at its mercy? Breathe in and shut my eyes to how it turns me into a sopping dish rag while I'm reading to my son, washing my daughter's hair. A prison of holy here and now, this nightmare made of stitched flesh, fur, and infant's feet, my terrible lithopedion. Please do not make me be your mother. Please, for this next breath. I do not know how to turn away a child, but I will. Blow out, slowly, relax grip on the cart's bar. Accept now that my body, our bodies, are the weep holes of the universe to which it pours itself through. Breathe into all of it, gushing the tiny cracks, opening foundation, the dry-walled skeleton pulsing with sacred knowledge. Let it pour, let it crack. Feel this dervish of pulling as I resist its gravity with all the force I can. Pay for the groceries, pick up the children, feed them, comfort them. All the crackling in the background bringing me to sit by my son's bed at night, and we sing me, my baby, and that dark surge. It is a holy sound, a broken choir of three. And I'll read one more poem from my new book, Black Dove, Paloma Negra. This is a poem about Frances, who was my great grandmother. Frances, you were a woman who rarely sat, I imagine. But in this photograph, you sit, all 4 feet 8 inches of you, erect and powerful as a queen, requiring no one to look to exist in that chair. But you were not of royalty. You were the mother of 10 children, and in your eyes are a 2-bedroom house, 600 square feet, in old 6th Ward, where you would bear and raise children, live with sisters and brothers and their children, sometimes cousins and distant relatives. You were quiet and gentle, but in the set of your black eyes, which would turn cataract gray, and the determined fix of your mouth, you carry the knowledge and strength to survive the loss of your son, Joe, who drowned in Buffalo Bayou at 12 years old. You carry the knowledge and strength of being an indigenous Mexican-American woman with the audacious dream and determination to see her brown boys go to war, come back alive, and then university, to see one daughter attend a music conservatory, and another daughter to study with the most prominent painter in town. You carry the imagination of turning the means of a blacksmith into generations of scientists, lawyers, bankers, business people, educators, writers, artists, and thinkers. Look at you, holding watercolored red flowers in your right hand, letting it hang, a sprig of purpled wildflowers decorating your breast. Your black hair let down to hang along the back of your white dress to the legs of the chair. Your feet dressed in hardy-pointy pointed boots, staggered with your legs crossed. You own the chair that you sit on and are the owner of all that will come to pass for our family, long after the time of this photo, circa 1910. A young bride at the brink of creating a history with her own hands and body, looking right at us in the eye. Don't come here with that foolishness. Bring what I made of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie.
That was wonderful. Thank you for sharing your poems. I'm gonna read a few poems, and the ones I've selected for me highlight some of the best things that I was able to take away from an MFA program and that I would like to, pass on to folks that work with me. And then it also incorporates some of the struggles that I went through in my MFA program that I would, again, want the people I'm working with to avoid, and make it sort of easier for them. One of the things that I was told in one of my writing workshops was like, hey, your family poems, we love those, keep doing that. The political poems, I don't know so much about those, but, and for a while that kind of tripped me up because, that's sort of what I wanted to write about. And then I was being told like, maybe that's not what I'm good at, or like, I don't know, writing political poems at the time wasn't really what was being published. So this is Reasons for Abolishing ICE. Reasons for abolishing ICE. Because the ice age is over now, ice. Because this isn't our first winter, ice. Because the polar caps are melting, ice. Because hands up if they say freeze, ice. Because it's getting hard to breathe, ice. Because it feels like walking on glass, ice. Because crops are rotting in the field, ice. Because it's clear it won't last forever, ice. Because it looks like a diamond but isn't, ice. Because you are here to take our people, ice. Because I think we know enough of hate, ice. Because we're gathering around the fire, ice. Because snowflakes also cause whiteouts, ice. Because you took the people out of police, ice. Because I see you, I see you, I see you, ice. Because black is considered more dangerous, ice. Because they say the polar caps aren't melting, ice. Because a person could slip through at any moment, ice. Because you say we can't use our voice to launch an avalanche, ice. Because if you want papers, then we'll crush you like book lice thumbed into paper. So I had to use some of the tools that I picked up in my MFA program to kind of, do the stuff that I wanted to do. And the way that I got to that was actually through mentorship. So I think that I'm excited to be working with folks because I think that it's a beautiful thing to be able to pass on something that you love to another person. Like, I just think about how things were passed on to me. Like, I studied with Dana Levin, and I know how much she loves craft, and it's this kind of connection that I have to her. And then she learned it, from other mentors. So I kind of really appreciate that aspect of working with folks. This next poem is, no, I'm not. Yeah, okay, I'll read that one. This one's a little bit more narrative. And again, it's one that I worked with. I wrote in my MFA program, and like the raw material was there. And it wasn't until after my MFA program that, again, I could kind of take those things that I learned and put it into the right container. And so a lot of what I learned in my MFA program was kind of to experiment and, just discover what might be the the right thing and just keep experimenting until that happens. So this is Mourning Dove. One shot through the neck was all it took for the dove to go down flat. No flit, not even the tinge of a note, a clean kill, a real beauty. The bird filled my two palms up whole with its body. At the end of my fingers, the neck dipped back, eyes semi-open, and blood dribbled out in rubies. This close, her eyelids looked larger than I could have imagined. My mother's eyes were like that the last time I saw her. Someone had powdered gunpowder blue eyeshadow to shadow the bruising. She never wore makeup, and now she would never wake up to take it off. A stray bullet sounds as harmless as a stray dog until that dog has you in its jaws. 10 years old, I took it to my father, who worked on the front porch stripping electrical cord from the plastic case, revealing a copper redder than any new minted penny. He would noose one end to the post and scrape as he walked along the yards of wire with his old skinning knife. Dad looked at the creature in my hands. Then he studied my hands, tracing with his eyes along my arms, chest, neck, face. He asked why I killed such a beautiful thing. I kept silent. He put down his knife and walked to the trash. Come here and I'll teach you what my daddy taught me. He snatched patches of feathers by pinching his fingers and pulling hard. Hold the bird using only your left hand. Pin the head down good with your thumb. Grab a few feathers with your free hand, then pull up and away from your body like you're lighting a match. Got that? I nodded. Do it till the bird is clean, weighing it lightly in one hand as if on a scale. This won't be enough. Keep shooting or she will have died for nothing, as he handed me the body. I like to write poems that I can read out loud, and I think that's part of my process, and something that I also picked up from a mentor. So I'm sorry, kind of thinking about like the folks who have been influencing me over the years, and this next poem is not one that was connected to my MFA program, but that I use language in here that I never would have thought I would use in a poem. Like, you know, sometimes you're in a workshop and someone says like, hey, you know, this is nice and all, but like this word takes me out of the poem. You know, you can't, this is poetry. You can't put McDonald's into your poem. And part of me, like my instinct is like, let me figure out a way how to do that. There's no McDonald's in this one, but that's a, you know, things in here I never would have imagined in a poem. Keeping home. Together, we almost compete with the chores of keeping home. But this isn't what we intended years ago when we said to each other, you complete me. We got monkey's paw in love, you see. Well, mostly you. You have a large heart. It sounds sweet unless it's a doctor who says it. Your cardiologist said, at least we can rule out pregnancy. You said, unless we count the agita, ulcer, kidney stone, take your pick. This sucks. We're falling apart, growing old together. Somewhere between the aisle with orthopedic inserts and the one with hemorrhoid cream. Fine, my love, I see what you mean. But we are growing old and we are growing together. Like the wild vine along our fence that, nameless, appeared to have been planted overnight, when in truth it fed on our neglect, crept link by link until it was the only thing, link by link, holding the fence together. And petty, when the neighbors called it a nuisance, we watered it, in spite of inedible berries, despite it choking out the lilacs. We called it kind of pretty. In this hotter than normal June, on this hotter than normal planet, I'll pull the weeds like electrical plugs, and if I croak from heat stroke, say I was your one and only monkey's paw. You mow the lawn and I'll gut the gutters, and maybe at your eulogy, I'll say he had the largest heart. And I'll end on this last poem. And again, this is a voice that I was trying to develop when I was in my MFA program, but I didn't know how to use those tools in that way. And through practicing and kind of continuing to work after an MFA program, I think that's part of, I guess, what I would want to instill in an MFA program is also not just like, yes, work on the poems that we're working on and toward a book, but to create a sustainable writing practice after folks graduate. This is Ode to the Corpse Flower. And there is some stronger language in this poem, just as a heads up. Ode to the Corpse Flower. In the language of flowers, I am the one who says, fuck you. I won't be anyone's nosegay. This Mary is her own talking bouquet. Never let a man speak for you or call you what he wants. I learned that the hard way. Amorphophallus titanum. It sure sounds pretty in a dead tongue, except it's Latin for big ugly dick. I mean, I am, but what an asshole scientist. I prefer to think of myself, and this may sound vain, as a goddess, cadaver dressed in drag, my stage name, Versace Medusa, part Lilith, part Calla-Lily. Keep your heteronormative birds and bees. Give me the necrophiliacs, the freaks, the meat-eating beetle and flesh fly. There I go again, allies, getting all hot and bothered, being vulgar. Vulgar meaning common, as when something is below you, like a girl forbidden to say fuck. It makes a woman sound so common. Oh, come on. That's all you expect from a flower, to be likable. But to keep it raw and 100 is to be abhorred. Fine, but even the haters will pay to hold their nose at a halftime show. They'll claim they are beyond Beyonce, sick of Selena, yet they can't look away from the live cam. No one wants to miss the showgirl as she breaks through the cake, unhooks her lingerie, La Virgen de Guadalupe, with a twist of Santa Muerte. What in the hell is she wearing? Glad you ask. Death is the new Christian Dior. The latest Chanel is corpse smell. I am the weak old ham hock whore of horticulture. I bring the hothouse haute couture, and I always come in last place. Dressed to the nines, I get what I want, which is to be the 10th muse. Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, little Levita de Buenos Aires, screwing and screwing over los descamisados on my rainbow tour. Fuck Whitman, fuck Pound, give me Emily D. Speaking of which, have I ever told you, Daddy, only sun gods get me hard. You want it, I got it. Let me show you how a chola really leans. Mother Nature may wear floral, but I ain't your mama. I thirst like Betty Boop at Pete Coquette, Marilyn Monroe blowing in an air vent. Say Malinche, say Truvada whore, give me more. I thrive in shade. My throat is my throne, so queen me, bitch. So, thanks.
Yay. Well done, all of our poets, well done. Thank you, everyone. So 2 things right off the bat I want to say. First of all, because I noticed in the room, there are students here who are already accepted to the program, and I know that they didn't apply for poetry. So just to let you know that you will still be hearing lectures from all of our poets, and that's also why we offer the options to study other genres, because you may come into the program, hear amazing work like this and say, wow, I really want to study that. So we give you the option to do that. The other thing, and Ben, this is a question I'd like for you to answer, because you've mentioned your MFA studies. What if there are people in the room right now thinking, oh my gosh, I can't do that. There is no way I can do that. What would you say to such a student?
So to clarify, to do that, you mean?
Right, like that, like any of you're all accomplished poets, right? And usually, and I say this because, 10 years ago, I was at an open house for an MFA and we were writing things. And I remember the woman next to me thinking, I can't do this. I can't write like that, right? And wonder if you even come to the wrong place.
Yeah, I think that I guess I think back to when I was in my MFA program and I had 0 publications and I was trying to get my work out there and it felt so impossible. You know, I'd read these magazines that I loved and I would submit there and kind of, you know, feel a little bit heartbroken. Like I had this joke about Agni that was like this unrequited love, and and my friends would get accepted into Agni, but I was like, you know, having a hard time with it. And after a while, I started to feel a little bit like, you know, maybe I can't do this. But I think that's part of why it's important to develop a sustainable writing practice and why it's important to work with people who will support you. For me, one of those people was Dana Levin. I never actually worked with her in like an official capacity, but I met her at a writing conference, and so it's kind of like a low residency thing, and we kept in touch since. And like her guidance and her like belief in me is part of what helped push me in that direction. And you know, my hope would be to help poets not necessarily write like this, but write the poems that they want to write, that they, you know, that only they can write. And I think that's part of like, you know, finding voice and finding your style and things that you gravitate toward, and learning from maybe things that you don't naturally go for. But like sometimes I avoid certain types of poetry, but when I go and actually engage with that work, it actually, even though I don't write like that, it can be so informative for the poems that I'm writing. So you can do it. That is my answer to the question.
Thank you. So I'm going to open it up for questions. If anyone has a question about studying poetry in the MFA or questions about anything you've heard this evening, I will open it up. Feel free to ask either in the chat or just raise your hand on screen and I'll see you, call on you. Yes, sorry, Trisha, go.
Okay, hi everyone. Loved everyone's work, just totally opened my mind up to another way to communicate and to just see the different weaves of tapestry and how the words are woven together to create a picture. And I was wondering, how do you, I'm sure in the program, there's a way to get to that place. How do you find the topic and, you know, how to just, with everyone that was speaking, I was wondering, how do you just open yourself up and say, you know, like Jim was writing about death, Leslie, she wrote about heritage, Ben just was just like wide open with the different ranges from, you know, how do you get to that place? Is that something that we're going to discover in the program? Because I really like that. I really, I felt that my soul was fed with every piece of work that I listened to tonight. And I want to say thank you. So that's a statement and a question and a whole bunch of crazy in there. So if you can figure out what I'm asking, I'm just, how do you get to that place to open and have the confidence to put it on paper and say, yeah, this is what my voice is for that topic.
Yeah, I see Leslie has something.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to address your question because when I attended a low residency program, and it was the best thing because of the lectures, in the workshops and the attention to craft. You are just being fed so much knowledge.
Right.
And when I started out, and you know, I had a lack of confidence and was very shy. I was exactly in the place of, I don't know what I want to say. I don't know how to say it, but I know that there is belief, and Benjamin brought that word up. You do have belief because you came to the meeting and you're thinking about applying. So you bring some little kernel of belief, and the mentor's job are to nurture that. And so you'll find your own way, but with these mentors giving you different tools and referring you to books, and it will open up doors for you, intellectually, and make you stronger. You have stories and ideas of what you want to write. I think that the thing is you have to build confidence, and a lot of that can be built by just feeding your mind. And that's what I loved about going to a low residency program. The whole time you're there, you are just engaged with intellectual activity, and it's awesome. I'm a nerd at heart.
And
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Leslie, I would add to that also it's about paying attention to what delights you, to what angers you, to what is going on within you. Because I found that when I would be asked to write something, for example, for an anthology, and at first, I'm somebody who wants to please, I'll be asking the editor, well, what do you have so far? What are you aiming for? What do you hope? But then I find myself, I stop and I say, wait a minute, what is bugging me? What is on my mind right now? And I think, forget it, I'm going to write this. And usually it turns out to be so much better because I'm writing from a place of authenticity and energy. There's a question here, and Jim, I'll aim this to you. This is from Ellen. She says, everyone is amazing, amazing, all of you. Carolyn Forsch once said, some poetry is meant to be read quietly. Other poetry is meant to be heard or /spoken. Oh, do you agree? Is that anything that inspires the way you write?
Okay, I'll take that on. Yeah, that's an interesting thing for Carolyn to say too, based on her own work, and what a good reader she is of her own work as well. So that's one of the big tensions in poetry, is the sound and sense. How poetry originated as an oral art form and evolved to this emphasis on the printed page with the invention and spread of the printing press. And then one of the interesting things, we're all talking and looking at each other due to technology, is technology in some way, particularly during COVID, has kind of brought back the, well, not just COVID, but the idea of performance poetry, slam poetry has been kind of going on for maybe last 20 years or so. And there's, with the technology, you can share the experience of reading like you could in a magazine in a way that you couldn't before. You would have had to been in the room for that specific reading. So there are more and more poetry readings online, and a lot of I think more writers who are paying attention to the sound and performance, as well as how it looks and how people perceive it on the page. So one of the things I think that I've become more open to, I'm not a great reader, as you probably saw this evening, but I do the best I can. But I certainly admire people who can really bring it to in the performance aspect of it. And it's funny, with my poetry workshop, we're just talking about poetry readings and do's and don'ts and different ways to present your work in the best light. And that in itself is difficult for many of us. And I think of Trisha's question as well, because again, it requires a certain confidence to present your work in a public way, just like it is to approach it and come up with your subjects and have confidence in writing it down in the first place. And that's what a lot of us as writers struggle with, because one of the reasons a lot of us became writers, or some of us at least, is because we're not very outgoing people. And so suddenly you publish a book and you're doing these readings, and I think as part of this program, we can certainly, there'll be opportunities for students to read and faculty and visitors. And through observation and discussion, you can really get a sense for at least some of the things not to do in a reading and some of the things that can really, in your presentation, to do justice to the effort and work you put into the poem itself.
I'm going to recommend, if anyone hasn't seen it, there's a wonderful YouTube video of all of these different people reading Sylvia Plath's poem, Daddy. And then at the very end, you hear Sylvia Plath reading it. And it's amazing how different all of these interpretations are. So it's like, I don't know, it's almost like there's a reason to read your work out loud, if only to put it out there the way you think it should be read, because other people will have their own interpretations of it, and it will live so differently on the page. It's something to think about. I still think about that video. Thank you, Jim. Marie, did you have a question? I wasn't sure if you were applauding or if that was a hand up.
I know. I don't know what. I have a question. I don't think I did that right because I don't normally use those. So sorry about that. But I was applauding too for all of you. But I have a quick question about, all right, when you study poetry, like the other nonfiction and fiction with the monthly work, you hand in 25, or you turn in 25 pages of work, I think it was. With poetry, how does that work? Do you study a type of poetry each month and you try to write that in so many poems of that? I'm just wondering how the monthly work of poetry, or is it 25 pages too?
Whoever wants to answer that.
Can I respond to, so the packet is going to be comprised of critical work, where you're looking at craft issues. From my own educational background with the low residency program, we focused on particular books. I would choose poems, but there's different ways that your mentor can set it up. But essentially, your focus is on the critical papers, analysis. You're going to be asked to read a lot, not just other poets, but theory, craft books. And then the creative part of it is that you will be turning in new poems or revising poems based on these craft elements that you're studying.
And Ben or Jim, you can add to that, but also Marie, there is a conversation about what it is that you want to learn, where your skills are in the moment. And as you submit work, it may surface that there are other things that you need to work on that your mentor will point out to you, and your work will move in that direction. The assignments may be refined.
Yeah, I think that there's room for individualizing the direction and how that's how the requirements are fulfilled based on the interest of the person that I'm working with. So for example, we were talking about like reading poetry out loud, right? And so someone might be really interested in how the performance of poetry. And so like that might require a different approach than if I'm someone who is really into formal poetry and I want to know like more about sonnets, and I want to just create like, you know, a crown of sonnets, which is a huge undertaking. And like that, there are two very different traditions. And so they would require, you know, a sort of working with them a little bit differently. But I think that there's also room for overlap. So like if I'm reading A Crown of Sonnets, there's still an element of performance when I'm reading them. And I think that learning how to read your work is part of craft. There is a skill there that can be learned. You know, and everyone's going to have their own way of reading, but there is a way of being able to transfer that experience, because there are poems that, you know, when you're reading them, it's a different experience than when you're reading them out loud. But you can transfer some of that. So for example, of this, there's a poet named Catherine Coles who writes these visual poems. They're kind of like part picture and part text. And they're these sort of little collages. And when you see them on the page, it's a totally different experience because you were having this visual component to it. But when she reads them out loud, she does really interesting things to transfer some of the stuff that's happening on the page. So in one of them, for example, this is going to sound a little out there. She translates like the notes of a bird who's singing into her poem that she's writing, right? Like she tries to indicate that in the poem using these punctuation marks. And then when she's reading it out loud, the way she does it is she came up with this little symbol that when she's reading out loud, you know that she's referring to this thing that's happening on the page, because when she reads it out loud, she does this thing. And I'm not doing it justice, but if you see her work and you see her reading, I should say, you can see how there's so much variety in this, and I think that definitely individualizing and tailoring it to the poet who is working is going to be important.
And I should add, since we're talking about readings here, that the students will have their own opportunity to read. They will have their own organized, like at the beginning of the residency, we'll ask for volunteers of who will be organizing the student readings. The student readings are informal. They are organized by the students and run by the students, just so that you can have this safe space where you won't have to be nervous in front of faculty, because faculty wouldn't necessarily be present, but it's to do it on your own so that you can practice and start to feel comfortable speaking your words in public. Because I know we will have students who have never read in public before. So this would give them a forum where their fellow students can cheer each other on and just give you a chance to try it. And hopefully residency by residency, you will get better at it leading up to when you finally do the public reading that you will do when you graduate. There's one more question in the chat. How does a writer avoid cliche?
Well, as best you can.
I know, I would say don't do it. Don't go there.
No, I mean, it is a serious issue, particularly for newer writers, in terms of sometimes something becomes a cliche because it's, I mean, like certain similes and metaphors become overused, and so they become a cliche where, you know, when Robert Burns first said, "My love is like a red, red rose," everybody said, "Oh man, wow, that's just blew my mind." What a comparison. But now rose and love are so monetized in our culture that that isn't going to wake anybody up in terms of that comparison. So I think, and again, the more you read, the more you become aware of what's been done before and how often it's done before. And you know, one of the writers talk about you know, having your own voice, and I think we probably all have more than one voice, but there is a sense of, you know, the comfort level that you have and developing a confidence. I mean, one of the things that I'm excited about, because I know some of you are prose writers, is my talk at the first residency is going to be about line breaks. because that's one of the big differences between poetry and prose, is you have the choice to break your lines however you want. And some people who are new to poetry or prose writers, they're not always aware of how to do that in a way that takes advantage of that choice that you have. And so I really, it sounds like a nerdy thing, but I really love talking about line breaks, and I'm busy working on that right now.
Thank you, Jim. There's a question here from about, I'm assuming this is about workshop. To each poet, as a faculty member in the Alma program, how do you plan to orchestrate the in-person sessions where a group of students is together with you to workshop their poems? What is your approach to this process?
I can comment. So I teach workshops now, but like Jim just brought up, well, you're already being engaged in conversations about craft with your mentor in between the residencies. But when you have workshops, this is the time to have feedback from other students and a faculty member. And your work is going to be looked at. If you've never had a workshop before, it will be entirely new, because your work will be looked at not from necessarily a reader's point of view, but from a writer's point of view in terms of how it's made. And it will be critiqued and looked at, dissected in a way that helps us understand, well, what is this poem doing? How is it made? What are some other possibilities for the poem? And is it doing what the poet wants it to do? Those are some of the things that I focus on in a workshop. Me in particular, I also make it artist-centered. So oftentimes writers ask not to speak when they're being workshopped. I do my workshops a little bit differently to keep, so that we don't spend a lot of time on a craft issue that is irrelevant to the poet. Like a single line people can talk for an hour about, and they're like, well, I don't really feel that line is important. So I try to avoid getting into that problem. But I'll open up to other faculty members to comment.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. There are so many different workshop styles, and I think that one of the something I would recommend is trying to have as many different experiences from different workshop leaders, because there is a lot to learn from different workshop styles. And I think that in an MFA program, at the same time that you're learning about the craft and the poetry that you're writing, it's also an opportunity to learn about how you lead a workshop, how you teach poetry, how you teach craft. And so there's two layers to them, especially if someone, is going to an MFA program because maybe they want to teach, right? That's a really great opportunity to learn from different teaching styles. And then as far as the poems go in the workshop, for me, working on the individual poem that we are workshopping that day or at that moment, that part is important, right? We do want to make, let this poem branch out into what it, develop and try to help guide it in that, and the writer in that direction. But I think as important is learning from that poem. Every poem that gets submitted, just because I'm not being workshopped doesn't mean I shouldn't be paying attention, right? Like that is actually one of the more important parts, because you learn so much from discussing someone's work. Yes, I want to make this one poem better, but when I'm workshopping these 8 other people, right? Like those are 8 opportunities to learn about this new poem or a different poem, a different style. And I think that it's important to facilitate a workshop that helps create community and also like encouragement rather than, you know, sometimes workshop can leave people, especially if it's a workshop that kind of devolves into just like, I don't like, or, you know, there, people can start to feel like either it's not necessarily helpful or that, you know, kind of down because it was kind of a rough workshop. You know, I would want to avoid that, not by not providing critique, but by, again, individualizing the poem, like trying to figure out, first of all, what is this poem trying to do, and the poet and how it works with the rest of their work, rather than me as a poet who likes, you know, writing in the style that I just read, imposing like, oh, you need to be able to read this more out loud, right? Like, not everyone's going to want to write that specific type of poem. So sorry, that was a meandering answer to a really great question, but there's a lot to say about those workshops.
What about you, Jim?
Yeah, yeah, I agree with a lot of what Ben and Leslie said. I think one of the key things is just to build on what Ben was just saying, is that one of the theories behind the whole idea of workshopping is that through recognizing issues and concerns with other people's poems, you begin to recognize it in your own. There's that transference of recognition, because one of the hardest things to do is to look at your own work with any kind of objectivity. So it helps when you notice things in other people's work and you say, well, I just did that same thing in my poem, but I kind of let myself get away with it in my poem. And so a lot of the workshop process is about that transference. Because one of the things, particularly when I first started taking workshops, is it was kind of, sometimes it's kind of a shock where you think everything's completely clear because it's all in your head. It came from your head. But so it's surprising sometimes to hear what other people were getting from your work. Sometimes it's a good kind of surprise. Sometimes it's maybe not such a good kind of surprise if it's like the opposite of you know, what your intentions are. But I think recognizing that and talking about each other's poems with that sense of generosity, and, you know, community is just a huge word. Nobody's going to come into an MFA program to get discouraged about continuing to write. And so I think I just try and take where you're at and try and move you forward, and everyone's going to be at different places. And I think one of the big things is not to compare your work to other people's work in a way that can, you know, sometimes be damaging to your confidence. You just have to, you know, nurture where you're at and what you're doing, and you will get better. You will get better.
Thank you, Jim. Well, if there are no other questions, I'd like to say one last thing this evening. The discussion tonight, especially the fact that we have so many prose writers in the room, made me think about this book by the author Walter Mosley. And if you haven't read it, it's this little book that he wrote called This Year You Write Your Novel. And in it, he talks about how when he was in school, he always took a poetry class. And he said, now, can I write a poem? He's like, no, I'm not a poet. I can't write a decent poem. But you can tell that there is poetry in his writing, in his prose, in his novels, and in his stories, because he has studied rhythm, he studied lyricism, and all of that can find its way into your work in the most beautiful way. So I highly encourage everyone to pay attention to poetry, to read poetry, to listen very carefully to our poetry lectures, and see, you know, just let it seep in and affect your writing. Yeah, Melanie, did you have
Yeah,
something?
I just real quickly that I want to be sure that I've heard this accurately. So yeah, sadly, I have to make a choice between one of the three lanes, I understand. So if I'm not choosing poetry, I will still be able to hear lectures and be exposed to offerings of poetry and so forth. That is my hope.
Yes.
Coming.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's
And
what.
there is also a degree option where you can take a term of poetry, and if you really get into it, you can do dual genre and do 2 terms of poetry. So the option is there.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome, Melanie. Well, anything else? If there is nothing else, I'm making sure that those aren't questions. Okay, those are thank yous in the chat. Great.
I was just, sorry, Sophronia, for interrupting. I just wanted to actually share that I'll be leading a workshop this Friday. It's free, so if anybody wants to join that, they are welcome to. It's about memory and how we can use that as a place to mine material, basically. And I'm going to share some of the techniques that I use to do that. And so to tie it into the MFA program, I think that one of the other great things about workshop is learning these kinds of little things that can help generate some of that work and help you explore, the material that you're interested in. And so if you're curious about that, I can send over the link, and we can probably email that out to folks who might be interested. But just to see how some of the workshops, some elements of those workshops, because obviously doing it through Zoom is a little bit different.
When is it again, Ben?
It's this Saturday.
It's this Saturday. Okay. So yes, we will definitely have the recording and send out that email before then. So you'll send me that information,
yes,
and I will get it out to everyone.
Great.
Thank you. Anything else? I think that's it. Yeah, Nan already wants to go. Okay, so we have people who want to go to Ben's workshop. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to Jim, to Leslie, to Benjamin for fabulous reading. Learn more about the Alma MFA in Creative Writing at alma.edu/MFA. Thank you for joining us this evening for Poets and the MFA. Everyone have a good evening, and I look forward to seeing you all soon on campus. Good night, everyone.